They say America's heartland is pure, endless fields, white fences, and small towns where everyone knows your name. But behind those smiles and Sunday sermons, there are places the maps forgot. Places where bloodlines never left, where the family tree stopped branching and started curling inward. Out there, beyond the reach of city lights, hidden in the folds of Appalachia, lies a valley whispered about by truckers and state troopers alike. No one goes there without reason, and those who do often don't talk about it again. They call it the Hollow. Before we go deeper into this dark story, make sure to subscribe to American Shadow, the place where real American crime stories come to life. Hit the like button if you're hooked, and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think about this case. On the surface, it looks like any other forgotten American town. A scattering of cabins, dirt roads swallowed by vines, and a silence too heavy to be natural. But if you stay long enough, you'll notice something. The people look different. Eyes a shade too pale, skin that never seems quite right, faces that echo one another like reflections in warped glass. For generations, the Hollow lived untouched, isolated by poverty, geography, and shame. Families married within their own again and again, until the line between kin and stranger blurred into nothing. The result wasn't just physical. It was spiritual, like something sacred had been broken and left to rot. Locals tell stories of children who spoke in tongues no one could understand, of men who barked like animals at night, of women who wandered barefoot into the woods and never came back. The county records are missing, destroyed, or misplaced. The government calls it an anomaly. The people who grew up there call it home. This isn't fiction. This isn't folklore. This is the story of America's most inbred community, a place that still exists, hidden in plain sight, a dark mirror of what happens when isolation festers into legacy. And as you'll soon see, this isn't just about genetics. It's about the corruption of love, the weight of shame, and what happens when a family refuses to let the outside world in, no matter the cost. Because once you enter the Hollow, it never really lets you leave. The origins of the Hollow trace back to the late 1800s, when a single family, the Whittakers, settled deep in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia. They came from nothing. Farmers, coal miners, drifters. The kind of people history doesn't bother to remember. But in that isolation, they found something that would define them for generations' distance. The mountains were both a wall and a womb, protecting them from the outside world, but also trapping them inside their own lineage. Roads were scarce, outsiders were few, and the world beyond those ridges was seen as dangerous, even sinful. So, they stayed, and when it came time to marry, they looked inward, not because they wanted to, but because there was simply no one else left. The first generations looked ordinary enough. But as time passed, something changed. The children were born different. Some couldn't speak. Others had hauntingly still eyes, as if watching from another world. Their neighbors whispered about curses, about God's punishment for blood that ran too close. But no one interfered. Poverty has a way of making people invisible. And the Whittakers were invisible long before their story became a spectacle. The few who did visit described encounters that sounded almost biblical in their horror. Journalists, missionaries, and lawmen told of siblings who communicated only through grunts or gestures, of adults with childlike minds, and a silence that felt heavy, like the air itself was remembering too much. But even then, they survived. Somehow, they hunted, they grew crops, they lived in those sagging homes generation after generation, forgotten by everyone except the mountains themselves. To the outside world, they didn't exist, and maybe that was safer, because the truth of what was happening in those woods would shake the nation if it ever came out. They weren't monsters. They were the consequence of neglect, of a country that built its greatness while burying its broken people. And the Whittakers, they were buried deepest of all. The world might never have known about the Hollow if not for the outsiders, those rare, curious souls who wandered too far past the county line. Most left after a single glimpse. But one man didn't. His name was Mark Whittaker, a photographer drawn to forgotten faces. He came searching for stories, and what he found would haunt him forever. When he first arrived, the locals warned him to stay away. They said the Whittakers didn't take kindly to strangers, that they didn't understand the outside world, and that the outside world didn't understand them. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, and when Whittaker finally reached their property, he knew immediately that something was wrong. The silence hit him first, a silence so deep it felt alive. Then came the smell of rot, the barking from somewhere unseen, and the faint rustle of movement in the brush. He met them one by one, members of the family who had never left the Hollow. Their faces were almost too similar, their mannerisms like echoes in a closed room. Some couldn't speak, only grunt or point. Others stared blankly as if reality itself had worn thin. And yet, behind the deformities and confusion, There was something unmistakably human, a kind of innocence and pain. Lada's photographs, later released to the world, didn't just show poverty or deformity. They showed the cost of abandonment. The Whittakers weren't hidden monsters. They were people shaped by decades of isolation, a living reminder of what happens when society forgets its own. His work tore the veil from a secret America didn't want to face. That beneath all its modern beauty, parts of the country still lived like ghosts trapped in time. But for the Whittakers, the exposure was a double-edged blade. The world that had ignored them now stared too closely. Some called them freaks, others victims, but no one could look away, because deep down every viewer knew what they were seeing wasn't just a family. It was a reflection of something buried inside all of us, the parts we hide, deny, and let decay in the dark. And once the truth was seen, it couldn't be unseen. After the world saw the Whittakers, it was easy to point fingers, to call them cursed, backward, or broken. But their story didn't start with madness or deformity. It started with something far more human: survival. Isolation had been their inheritance. For generations, they lived miles from paved roads, schools, and hospitals. They didn't choose to close themselves off. The world closed itself off from them first. When industry came to the mountains, it took everything to people. The coal companies stripped the land, then left it hollowed, poisoned, and forgotten. Towns died, rail lines vanished, and what remained was a landscape of ruins and silence. Families like the Whittakers were left behind, their homes turning into prisons of geography and shame. The deeper they withdrew, the tighter their world became. Marrying within their own blood wasn't sin, it was inevitability. Over time, the walls between love and necessity blurred. There were no outsiders to bring new blood, no teachers to offer new thought, no doctors to warn of what generations of inbreeding could do. And so the children bore the weight: physical deformities, cognitive disabilities, and a kind of haunting sadness that seemed to echo through their eyes. But what's most unsettling isn't their condition. It's how easily it could have been prevented. The government knew. Social workers knew. Everyone who passed through those counties knew. Yet no one helped. Because in the eyes of the system, the poor are invisible, and the poor inbred are unspeakable. The hollow became a place where time froze, where progress never came. And in that frozen silence, the family turned inward, generation after generation, until the outside world became something monstrous, something to be feared. So when we call them America's most inbred family, we should also call them what they truly are: America's forgotten children, victims of a cycle that began long before they were born, a cycle not of blood, but of neglect. And that, perhaps, is the darkest truth of all. The curse of the hollow wasn't born from sin, it was born from being left behind. If you've made it this far, you're already braver than most. Most people turn away when they see the Whittakers. They scroll past the photos, change the channel, pretend it's not real. Because looking into their eyes means confronting something ancient, something we all share, but spend our lives running from. When Mark Lada filmed them, he said it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. The camera captured more than faces, it captured echoes of generations collapsing inward. You can see it in the trembling hands, the uncertain glances, the sounds that don't form words but still speak volumes. These aren't just the faces of inbreeding. They're the faces of memory, of a lineage trapped in a loop, living proof of what happens when evolution loses its way. Some call it genetic decay, others call it divine punishment, but maybe it's neither. Maybe it's just what happens when human connection collapses, when isolation becomes inheritance and love becomes necessity. In the hollow, family isn't just everything, it's everyone. And still, there's something deeply unsettling about their gaze. Because when you stare long enough, it stops feeling like pity and starts feeling like recognition. That's the part people don't talk about. It's not that the Whittakers remind us of monsters, it's that they remind us of ourselves. Of what could happen if the walls ever closed in, if civilization ever cracked, and we were left with nothing but our own blood. You see, horror isn't always found in the supernatural. Sometimes it's found in the ordinary, in what happens when the light of progress never reaches a place, and darkness grows where knowledge should have been. So tell me this, if you had been born in the hollow, raised among those same hills and faces, would you have been any different? Or would you too have carried the curse forward, calling it family, calling it love, because you knew nothing else? If you're still watching, you're already braver than most. Tell us in the comments. What would you have done if this was your bloodline? When the world finally turned its eyes toward the hollow, it didn't do so with compassion, it did so with fascination. The Whittakers became viral overnight. Their faces, once hidden from the world, were now splashed across screens in every corner of it. Millions watched, millions judged, and almost no one understood. For the family, the attention was confusing, sometimes terrifying. Strangers began showing up on their land, calling their names, filming them without consent. Some offered help, but most just wanted to see. The Hollow, once a place of isolation, became a living sideshow, proof that the modern world still feasts on the suffering of others. Mark Lada's intention had been empathy, not exploitation. But once the internet got hold of the images, empathy drowned beneath mockery and shock. People laughed, others moralized, few reflected. Because it's easier to point and say, "Look how strange they are," than to ask, "How did we let this happen?" The family's small world became smaller. Trust eroded. Some members withdrew even deeper into silence, while others clung to the few visitors who treated them like humans instead of curiosities. The Hollow became a mirror, showing the world not just what inbreeding looks like, but what dehumanization does. For every headline calling them the most inbred family in America, there was a truth no one wanted to print, that this wasn't a story of horror, but of heartbreak, a lineage that never had a chance to grow outward, a community left to collapse inward. The Whittakers didn't ask to be remembered. They didn't ask to become symbols of America's hidden decay. But history has a way of using the forgotten to reveal the rest of us, because if we can look at them and feel disgust, but not guilt, then maybe we haven't learned anything at all. So the next time you see their faces, remember this: they aren't the monsters in the story. They are the consequence, and the real monsters are the systems that let them fade into the dark, only to drag them into the light when it was too late to save them. Today the Hollow still stands. The same sagging homes, the same dirt paths swallowed by weeds, the same eerie quiet that makes the air feel older than time. Some of the Whittakers remain there, still surviving in the place their ancestors built, still holding on to a world that the rest of America forgot existed. The cameras have mostly gone now, but the headlines faded, but the whispers never stopped. The Hollow has become a symbol, one that no one fully understands. People drive past those mountains without knowing what's hidden just beyond the trees. They see nothing but forest, but inside those woods, time has folded over itself. Generations living with the echoes of choices made long before they were born. And what's most haunting is that they've accepted it, not as tragedy, but as truth. Because when a wound lasts long enough, it begins to feel like part of the body. But maybe, in some way, the Hollow isn't unique. Maybe it's just the darkest reflection of something that exists everywhere. The parts of society that get left behind. The small towns swallowed by poverty, the families forgotten by progress, the communities trapped in their own silence. The Whittakers are only extreme because their suffering became visible. Most others simply stay invisible forever, and that's what makes this story so haunting. Because it isn't just about genetics or poverty or shame. It's about what happens when humanity itself fractures, when compassion stops at the county line. We look at them and tell ourselves they're different, that something like that could never happen to us. But history has a cruel way of repeating itself wherever neglect takes root. If the Hollow teaches us anything, it's that horror doesn't always come with fangs or ghosts. Sometimes it looks like a family trying to survive. Sometimes it looks like a nation turning away. So as this story closes, remember this: America's darkest places aren't buried underground. They breathe, they live, and they wait. Because the Hollow was never just a place in West Virginia. It's the part of America, and maybe the part of us, that refuses to heal.